Welcome back to Real Repairs for Real Customers. We've been hearing about a dilemma in the furniture repair industry lately. We hear from the retail public, we can't find anybody to repair our couch. It could be because the repairs are more extensive, or the upholstery shops certainly don't have either the time or the knowledge to repair what's needed to be done. And as far as the repair technician is concerned, we hear from them, I can't make money doing repairs anymore on furniture. Perhaps the damage is so extensive that it takes too much time, or we don't have a repair process for such extensive damages. Well, I don't have the answer to either of those questions, but as my role is in the industry to push for an answer to those, we may not have a definitive answer, but let's explore, right? Let's open up new worlds, as it were, to see what we can find out. Perhaps we can find a way, right? Perhaps the repair technician can find a way to do it that no one else is doing now that is profitable. Or if we don't bring in all of the profit we hope to on this job, will it open the door for other opportunities? We want to also have a far-sighted look, not just this job, but what does it mean for other jobs that are inevitably going to come up? Will the new method prove helpful there? So that's a good question. We're going to pursue that a little bit, and for our first case study, we have this particular couch that was delivered to us. Now, for some backstory on this, I stitched this seam for a retail customer. This lady lives just a few miles away from me, so I consider her my neighbor. So since then, though, she's wanted to replace this particular patch that an upholstery shop had done sometime previously, because now the whole panel has cracked. It's got brittle, dried out, it's cracking. She wants to replace the entire panel. So on this particular couch, her husband was able to take some screws loose and just take one half of the couch, and that made it easy for him to deliver. So I really appreciate that. But look at the design here. The design looks so complicated to me that I can't even imagine dismantling the whole thing in order to sew in a section of vinyl here. So that raises the question, can we replace this section by hand as it sits now? Let's find out. The needle we use for leather has a flat top, giving it a chisel point. Now the round tip needle we use for cloth. The round tip finds its way between the cloth fibers without cutting the fibers. The leather needle, on the other hand, well, it's the same hand, cuts its own hole. Notice the difference in the eyes of the two needles. The leather needle has a larger eye to accommodate leather lacing, but it's a bit large for the hand sewing thread. The hand sewing thread fits nicely on the round tip needle, so the needle hangs snugly on the thread. But it can be frustrating when the leather needle constantly falls off of the hand sewing thread because of the larger eye. So you can whack the needle gently at first to try to collapse the eye just a bit. And as you see here, we didn't do very much, but at least we got a feel for it. So we know we can go a little bit harder this time. Not too bad, but we can go just a little bit more. Well, okay. Let's take a look over top of our backlight that we put up here to give you a little better view of that. There you go. Here is the hand sewing thread on the round tip needle. So while using one needle, when we're doing the double needle blind stitch, the other needle left hanging will not fall on the floor. And now for the leather needle. Perfect. You will find the needle threaders very handy. Stick it through the eye of the needle, and then you've got a wide gap here between the wires to stick the thread, and when you pull it through, it pulls the thread right through the eye without struggling. So even with a real tight eye in the needle, it's no problem. And this is our leather needle again, so we're in good shape. Now let's get to work. And to give myself a little bit more room for working, I've decided to move this cushion over a little bit so that we can compress it. And I'm going to use a strap to do that. Already I've saved a lot of labor by not having to remove the cushion. So this is one step in answer to the original dilemma we posed at the beginning, just by showing a little bit of ingenuity. And of course, getting a few measurements. That was pretty neat that I happened to have a piece of scrap leather that fit close to the color of this couch. And the lady really wanted leather instead of vinyl. And since I already had the scrap, why not use that? So she not only gets a replacement for the vinyl, but she gets an upgrade at the same time. Now, all the other panels on the other two pieces of furniture were not brittle or cracked, they were soft and supple. So adding the leather on this arm then should give her a flexibility there for a long, long time. And you can understand the advisability of putting money into this repair in order to save the whole set of three pieces. Getting what you need to charge seems more reasonable when you look at it from that angle. Often when we do double needle blind stitch on automotive parts where the leather is a bit thick, we generally go about 3/8 of an inch of travel for each stitch. But for other finer pieces such as this furniture, and especially where the leather is more flexible, we are measuring out 1/4 inch or about 6 millimeters for each stitch. And this will present a tighter finished look. If that sounds like a lot of hand stitching, yes it is. And so therefore I'm going to use a punch to pre-punch my holes. That'll make it so much easier on the fingers. While I was doing this, I was thinking it's only been, a couple of hundred years that we've had sewing machines. All sewing was done by hand for thousands of years. So Really, we're just getting back to the old ways here, and we shouldn't be afraid to do it. Thinking about doing it might be the hardest part. Doing it's the easy part. And of course, we will need corresponding holes on the other part. And here's the part you came to see. Now on the leather side, I'm going to pre-punch the holes. On the vinyl side, I don't see any need to do that because the needle will go through vinyl like a hot knife through butter, or even a cold knife through hot butter. On getting started, we can use the round tip needles. And why is that? That's right, because the round tip needles want to find these pre-existing holes, whereas the leather needle would be trying to make its own new hole. It's always a bit cumbersome getting started off here with these loose pieces, so expect a few extra minutes at the very beginning just to get the pieces oriented properly. Once those are anchored with a few stitches, we will be off to the races. One side done, one to go. On getting started on the vinyl side, I am using an S-curve needle which has an especially sharp and large chisel point to pre-punch a hole right through this seam where the vinyl is doubled up. So bear in mind that you can always use that as a helper. We can't get the punch into this seam here because we haven't cut it loose. We've left it anchored. Nonetheless, at any time we need to pre-punch a hole, we can use that S-curve needle. Now, it will be your call whether to use the chisel point leather needle or the round tip needle for this step. Because if the round tip goes through the vinyl just fine, then there's no need to use the chisel point. Just whatever happens to work for you in that situation. So other than that, this is just a repeat of the first side. So far, so good. Now to close up the end, we'll mark some points directly across from each other to get us a nice even stitch. Your choice here whether to pre-punch the holes or to use the chisel point needles for the leather. Now you could imagine you wouldn't want to undertake a job like this on someone's couch unless you had absolute full confidence in the double needle blind stitch. With that confidence, though, you have every reason to have faith that you can accomplish this. If in the past you were successful with one seam, you can ask yourself, why can't I do 4 seams? And with that reasoning, you can step up higher and meet the challenge. Is this too much hand stitching to be done in a day? It can very well be. Depending on how fragile your fingers are. One long stitch I did in the morning, I believe, on this one, and the other long stitch I did in the afternoon. And by then I was so close to getting it done, I went ahead and buttoned up everything else. So yes, this was done in a day. But that's not an absolute necessity when you take on an extra large job of hand stitching. And the customer should be made aware of that. In fact, I have had one large contract job where I told the people that I could only sew for 2 hours a day maximum, and then it might not be every day if I needed to give my fingers a day off. And they were fine with that. That was a stipulation of the job from the very beginning. Can you spend a half hour each day for several days? If you do, maybe that won't detract so much from the other jobs where you're making better money. In that case, you would be working this job in. Of course, everybody's circumstances are going to be different. That's going to close up the end. We are going to come back to here, though, and run some stitching to combine these panels better along the top there. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get there. It's hard to describe. First of all, we're going to take a break off of the stitching and recolor our panel. Of course, we've got to clean all the sweat off. And prep. And let's wipe on a couple coats of color. And anyone care for a little bit of clear? Now we're coming back to this end, and I'm closing up the top. We're going to run that top seam around the corner, and that'll even things out really nicely. I didn't take you all the way to the end here because we filled up our memory card right about at the end. But here we can use the chisel point needles and just plow our way through the leather. You can see that's going to give us a nice, neat finish. And the other end has already been tidied up the same way as we did this one. So our job is finished, but there was a good bit of dirt right here over a long time of usage. So since I already had the color, why not clean it up a little bit and blend a little color into the seat. A little added value. Clear. And we can't forget to put our foam back in place and zip it up. And we are done. I hope you enjoyed that repair. In part 2, we're going to continue our discussion about this furniture repair dilemma we were talking about. I hope to see you there in part 2, where we climb to even higher heights.